Good morning. Glad that you're here today. So do you want to know the big secret? Or would you rather find it out for yourself like I did? That is the question that this father asked to this son in a movie that I saw about time travel. Now, chances are you've probably stumbled across a movie or a show about time travel at some point as well. I did a search this week on IMDb, as the international movie database for the shows and movies and TV shows that have to do with time travel. It told me that there are 2,905 shows that talk about time travel in some ways. You've probably seen one too. Usually they are not my cup of tea, but this moment really made me stop and think. So here's this father, and he's talking to his son, and he says, do you want to know the secret? Or would you rather find it out like I did for yourself? And the son's eyes kind of widen. Now, the secret that he's talking about is not how to time travel. In this movie, they've already been doing that for some time. In this movie, it's kind of a family thing, handed down from a father to a son at age 18, and they have the ability to go back to moments in their own life and try to relive them. And this son has been doing that for a while. In fact, he's, as often happens in these shows, made a mess of things quite a few times, trying to go back and change maybe stop some terrible thing that happened, or go back and scrub over some embarrassing moment or shameful moment or painful moment that's come along in his life. But now the father sits him down and says, you've done all that. I'd like to share with you the secret to how to really use this thing you can do for the most fulfilling life. So the son kind of perks up at that. He says it's a two-part plan. Part one, just get on with your ordinary life. Taking every single day just like anybody else. And as he kind of explains what he means by that, the movie starts to show us little scenes from this young man's ordinary life. So he's getting up to go to work one day, and his 2-year-old daughter is just spilling milky Cheerios all over her face and all over his briefcase. He gets to work, and his boss is just reaming out one of his friends about something that he could have done better. And then they show him, and he's late to a meeting, and he's rushing, and you can just see the anxiety in his face. He picks up dinner at a street cart downtown on his way to the subway, and the whole time he's talking to the cashier, he's just looking down at his phone. He gets on the subway, the guy next to him, it's too crowded. The guy next to him is blaring heavy metal music through his earphones. And the father says, just take that day exactly as it is. Live that day like everybody else. And then part two to his secret, live it one more time. And hardly change a thing about that day. The first time, live it with all of the tensions and worries and pains of an ordinary day, the kinds of things that keep you from noticing how sweet and good life can be. And then the second time, live it again, noticing. And so we see him live that day a second time. And how he makes sure to plant a kiss on the cheek of that 2-year-old girl with the milky face. And he slips a little joke to his friend when his boss is not looking to cheer him up on his bad day. And as he rushes to that meeting, he's still late to the meeting, but he pauses for just 1 second, sees the sunset. When he's picking up his dinner and he's talking to the cashier, he puts down his phone, has a nice exchange, shares a smile. When he's on the subway, the music's blaring, but he just kind of bops along to it, taps his foot, and goes along. And what we have are these 2 days, which are the same day, an ordinary day, a mixed bag of a day, and yet there's this one tiny, enormous difference, right? And what's the difference? What is the Father's secret? It's actually something that I think our passage kind of speaks to today. We're continuing in our journey of looking at these passages in Luke where Jesus is presented as a misunderstood master, and that brings us today to Luke chapter 9, the middle of it. And this is a story, spoiler alert, that has nothing to do with time travel, obviously, but it does have something to do with the difference between those two days. The first one and the second one. Because in this passage, Jesus is pulling back the curtain and giving a glimpse of a big secret. And what I wonder today is how living in the knowledge of that secret could change those who know it. So this is Luke chapter 9. We're going to begin in verse 28. It is a well-known passage. Probably some of you are going to know it right away. But I want you to think about, don't sleep on the fact that this is a very peculiar thing that these people are living in right here. So verse 28, about 8 days after these sayings, and what it's talking about there is that just before this part of Luke 9, Jesus has just said to the apostles for the first time, I'm going to die. He's just dropped that bombshell on them that, in fact, they've been following him, thinking he's going to be the king who's going to put them right on track where they want to be. But actually, he's going to be handed over and crucified and killed. And oh, by the way, if you want to keep following me, you need to pick up a cross like I'm going to and follow in my footsteps. That's what he's just told them. You can imagine how heavily this is weighing on the apostles who have devoted their whole life. They've left everything to follow this man that is going to be the king. And he says, I'm going to die. If you want to follow me, pick up a cross. After these sayings, he took with him Peter and John and James, and they went up on the mountain to pray. And as he was praying, get this, the appearance of his face was altered, and his clothing became dazzling white. And behold, 2 men were talking with him, and not just any 2 men, Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and spoke of his departure, which was about to be accomplished in Jerusalem. Now, Peter and those who were with him were heavy with sleep. Makes me wonder if this is happening at night or what, but they're heavy with sleep. But when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men who stood with him. And as the men were parting from him, Peter said to Jesus, Master, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you and one for Moses and one for Elijah, not knowing what he was saying. And as he was saying these things, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. And a voice came from that cloud saying, This is my son, my chosen one. Listen to him. And when the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they kept silent and told no one in those days of anything that they had seen. Now, just think for a minute with me. Like, imagine you're Peter, you're James, or if you want to, you can be John. Pick one of them. What has just happened? Like, what have you just witnessed? And why in the world has Jesus trekked these 3 people up a mountain to show him all of these things that you just saw? Maybe wakes you up in the middle of the night. I don't know. And why do all of this 8 days after just telling the disciples the most incomprehensible news, the most troubling thing he could have possibly told them? What is Jesus showing them? Why did he do this? Because what I think Jesus is showing them in this passage is the big secret. A change your whole outlook on life truth. In one out of nowhere moment, these three disciples are really given a glimpse into the future, you could say. They are shown in this moment several things that only later are going to become clear. So first, they are shown Jesus in all of his glory. Like for a moment, God just allows him to be seen in this radiant, dazzling appearance. It's like the kind of thing you see in Revelation, or the kind of thing Paul talks about of the risen Jesus in 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians when he talks about his unveiled glory being beyond compare. And here they have this little glimpse of what one day will be seen, the glory of Jesus. Meanwhile, standing with him are these two men, Moses and Elijah. Wow. And that would be wow in and of itself, but look at what they're talking about. As they talk, verse 30 and 31, they're spilling secrets about things that haven't happened yet. They've gathered together on this mountain and they're talking together about Christ's departure. What does that mean? The word is his exit from the earth, his exodus. They're talking about when he is going to be raised up and then lifted up back into heaven and leave the earth. They're talking about things that haven't happened yet. They're talking about all the things that Jesus is going to accomplish at Jerusalem. The disciples have this chance to listen in and hear the things that are coming. Nothing short of the plan of God's salvation for the world is being bantered about by Moses and Elijah and Jesus on this mountain, within earshot of these three men. And then this voice speaks out of the cloud. It's God's voice from heaven, and singles out Jesus and says, "That's my son. The one that I have chosen is right here, so listen to him." And these disciples get to see that the one standing in their midst is even greater than Moses, is even greater than Elijah. In fact, he's going to fulfill the law and the prophets, the things that came before him, which of course we see in full very soon, but not yet. So all of these things happening on the mountain are things that are going to be made known soon. But then Jesus, right here and now, gives the disciples this little glimpse. This glimpse into the future. Why would he do that? Or put it this way, what is Jesus offering to the disciples by giving them this glimpse of things to come? I kind of think what he's offered them is like the ultimate outlook changer. He's given them this chance on this mountain to view the way that the story is going to end when Jesus is glorified and his mission is accomplished and he's proven to be who they believed that he was. It's like this little glimmer of reassurance, right? You are following exactly the right person. You have chosen the right path to go down. The person you're following is nothing less than God's son. Period. That's who he is. This is like the ultimate way to frame your outlook on life gives them this view of the end, like if you saw the end of the movie while you were like right in the middle of it. That's the view from this mountain. And Jesus gives this to his disciples, and it could not come at a moment sooner. Because from this moment forward, when they come down from this mountain, things are going to get really tough. From this moment forward, when they come down from the mountain, Jesus is going to set his face to go to Jerusalem toward his destiny, toward the cross. And from this moment forward, their master is going to start talking about things a whole lot more often that have got to be really concerning if you're one of his disciples. Like way more frequently, he starts to say these troubling things like, let these words sink into your ears. The Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men. And things like foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. Things like, I have this mission, and how great is my distress until it is accomplished, and I must go on my way because it can't be that a prophet should perish away from Jerusalem, and whoever does not bear their cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. And he's saying things like this more and more and more. These are the kinds of things he's saying all the time after the mountain, talking openly about how he's going to be delivered to the Gentiles, mocked and spat upon and flogged and killed. I've asked you to put yourself in the shoes of Peter, James, and John. How is all this landing on them? Things are getting harder from this mountain moment forward. It started in the moments leading up to the mountain, but now, from this point forward, this mission that they're on, hard to see how this is God's plan. And this road they're going down with Jesus, it's getting harder and harder to follow the path that he has set himself on. And then it only gets harder. When Jesus starts passing around a cup at the table and says, "This is my blood." And when he takes a little detour to the garden and says, "Wait here," while all night long he's just far enough away that you can hear him wailing and crying. And then they come with torches and they arrest him like a terrorist. And they're turning the screws on you and saying, "Weren't you one of their followers as well?" And then he dies in this public and shameful way. Like, what I'm saying is everything after this moment on the mountain is going to be so very hard. And so what a gift it is that here, before it all, Jesus offers this little glimpse, this little reassurance of his greatness and who he really is. Jesus offers them the chance to live with a knowledge of the end in mind. And that could be such a game changer. It doesn't mean that they know every fork and bump in the road. And it doesn't mean that they're excluded from the painful moments that are down that road that they're traveling. But no matter what may come on that journey to the cross, Jesus gave them a chance to see the light at the end of the tunnel. He showed them the rest of the story. In that way, they have something in common in a strange way with that time traveler guy I was trying to tell you about earlier. That movie makes you think about, how would you live your life if you knew how the story would go? What would you do differently? How would it free you up even in the difficult parts of life? In real life, I believe that's what Jesus offers to Peter and James and John. A glimpse of how the story is going to go. Now, to be fair, they don't really grasp what they've been given. And Peter says that weird thing about the tents. I would love it if one of you would explain to me what Peter's talking about here, because I've tried and I still am not sure that I know what Peter's talking about. And to be fair, Peter doesn't seem to know what he's talking about either when he talks about these tents. Now, I've read somewhere that maybe what he's doing is he's trying to stay in this moment, like you don't want to leave this glorious moment. And maybe that's what it is. Hey, give me this moment, don't give me that road to the cross. Give me Christ glorified, but not Christ crucified. I don't know. Maybe Peter's just not listening enough. And so the voice from heaven, that's what it says. It says, hey, look, you got a big show going on, but listen. Listen to him. Take note of this thing that's happening. This will help you along the way. Maybe that's it. There's some misunderstanding going on here, though. And when they come down from this mountain, we find that it's hard. Even if you've been given this glimpse of the end, it's hard to actually live your life with the end of things in mind. And so the next thing you know, they start bickering about who's the greatest, or talking about who's going to have the greatest throne in heaven. And then Jesus is arrested, and they scatter. And they deny Jesus. And even though they were given this glimpse of the end in mind, it's hard to live with that always on your heart. In some ways, I think, maybe we're not so different either. Haven't we also been given this glimpse into the future? Don't we also have a chance to live our lives here with the end in mind? No, I've never encountered anything quite like what Peter and James and John experience in Luke chapter 9. But I do live on this side of the resurrection. So do you too. And how easy is it to lose sight of the future? We live in the afterglow of the most glorious thing that God has ever done. God working for the salvation of the world through Jesus, raising Jesus from defeat to eternal exalted glory. And for people of faith, that ought to change things. In Christ, we've been given a glimpse of the future. It is a glimpse of our future. 1 Corinthians says that Christ has in fact been raised from the dead, and it's the second half of that verse that should be truly exciting. He is but the first fruits of those who have died. What we saw in him by faith, believing that he's risen, we are seeing a glimpse, a glimmer of our own future if we are in Christ. For if we have been united with him, this is Romans, in a death like his, and that is talking there about our baptism. We're buried with Christ in baptism and raised up anew. If we've been united with him in a death like his, we will certainly be united with him in a resurrection like his. That right there is the outlook-shaping truth of the way our story can go. This is the future that Christ's resurrection gives us a glimmer of. When God raises him up, if we have been clothed with Christ, we can live with this end in mind. And no matter what we go through in life, whatever hard things we may face, we can at least face them with this glimpse, treasured in our hearts. Like Peter and James and John, we do not know every fork and bump in the road, but we do know where this story is going. So I guess the question for all of us today is, will we live that way? Will we live with the end in mind? because of what Christ has shown us? Will we approach every day just like any ordinary day, like everybody else, or will we let this outlook shape the way that each and every day comes to us? We have seen the light at the end of the tunnel, so let's live like we know where the story ends. One of the ways you could be challenged to do that today is in responding to the gospel. That is, of course, the greatest way to respond to this message here. Jesus said near the end of Mark that whoever believes and is baptized will be saved. The one who does not believe will be condemned, meaning you can have the hope and the assurance in your life of where your story is going. When you put on Christ, you strive to live faithfully to him. Today we offer an invitation, which is the opportunity to do exactly that. Maybe for others of us, the thing that you need in your life is to live each day with that glimpse of hope treasured in your heart. Hebrews talks about seizing the hope set before us because it can be an anchor for our souls when we need it the most. And maybe that's what you need today. However you may be called or challenged today, we give this moment an opportunity to respond while we stand, while we sing.